Claudette Colbert became America's highest-paid movie star in 1938. She was renowned for her performances in some of the most revolutionary movies of the decade, and for her impeccable style, high glamour, and famously stunning legs. Despite her celebrity status, Colbert experienced many personal insecurities. Her professional life was tainted by controversial gossip, explosive incidents during filming, and secret marriages, not to mention a complex and sinister relationship with an obsessive female artist. These factors led to challenges in collaborating with her, reinforcing her image as a diva. But there was far more to Claudette Colbert than the diva image. Let's take a detailed look at the woman who is called the epitome of chic sophistication. On September 13, 1903, in Saint-Mandé, a quaint eastern suburb of Paris, Jeanne-Marie Chauchon, at the age of 26, welcomed her second child, a baby girl. Right after his daughter's arrival, Georges Claude Chauchon made his way to the local parish church to sort out the newborn's baptism. Jeanne, alongside her mother, Marie-Augustine Lowe, had their hearts set on naming the baby Lily. The name Lily was chosen in honor of Lily Langtry, a British stage star who was born on the island of Jersey, as was Marie-Augustine. It seemed as good of a choice to Madame Chauchon as any. However, the priest in charge of the baptism had other ideas. He insisted on a saint's name. In France at the time, it was the norm to name children after the saint of the day on which they were born, and straying from this tradition was quite rare, and there was no Saint Lily. Nevertheless, a compromise was found in the name of Saint Emilia, which also happened to be the newborn's aunt's name. The church may have had its say, but the Chauchons had their workaround. The official documents would list her name as Émilie, serving both as her birth and baptismal name, but only on paper. To everyone else, she was Lily. Young Lily loved her father, who was 36 at her birth, but hadn't yet found his life calling. Previously a banker, he had suffered from poor investment choices. Over time, Lily became aware of her parents' unfulfilled dreams and the tension it was causing. Her mother harbored the belief that she had married below her station. She was convinced she could have shone as an opera star if not for her marriage to Georges Chauchon, a man full of dreams, but lacking in career direction. Jeanne loved her son Charles with all of her heart, but Lily was a daddy's girl, and in Jeanne's eyes she had inherited everything she disdained in her husband. Even as Lily Chauchon transformed into Claudette Colbert, a luminary on both stage and screen, her mother withheld the recognition Claudette yearned for. While Claudette enjoyed the adoration of audiences worldwide, her mother dismissed her achievements, referring to her simply as une actrice, with all the contempt she could muster. But Claudette was a long way off for now. Thankfully, Lily found solace and support in her grandmother, Marie-Augustine Lowe, and Tantine, her aunt Emily Lowe. Being a Jersey native, Marie-Augustine spoke English. The island has long belonged to England in spite of its close proximity to France, and the culture is a mixture of British and French. Having a bilingual grandmother definitely gave young Lily a leg up in learning English quickly when she arrived in the United States. Claudette later often claimed that her first visit to America was in 1906, a statement many misunderstood as her immigration year, which was actually 1911. Indeed, she did first lay eyes on New York as a 3-year-old during a family trip in 1906, but it was 5 years later that the family decided to make a permanent move. On September 30th, 1911, Georges, Jeanne, their 2 kids, and Tantine set sail from Le Havre aboard the SS Chicago, arriving in New York on October 9th. Lily, who switched the IE for an anglicized Y in her name, was enrolled at Public School 59 at 228 East 57th Street, now known as the Beekman Hill International School. The school's location was perfect, just a short walk from their 5th-floor apartment at 226 East 53rd Street, between 3rd and 2nd Avenues. Each day after school, Jeanne would give Lily a piece of chocolate and send her to play in Central Park, which Jeanne saw as New York's answer to Paris's Bois de Vincennes. Lily's grasp of English strengthened swiftly, with her lessons from Marie-Augustine, which were a great help. Later, as an actress, she hardly struggled with scripts. The educational curriculum back in Lily's day would be unthinkable today. Repertoire required English teachers to dedicate the 1st and 10th weeks of each term solely to poetry. immersing students in classics like Walt Whitman's O Captain, My Captain, Thomas Gray's Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard, and works by Lord Byron, William Wordsworth, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and lines from Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. The declamation department not only had students read poetry, but also recite it. The goals were to train their memory, enliven their imagination, and instill an appreciation for the rhythm and cadence of language, all skills that would serve the young actress quite well. At Washington Irving High, Lily discovered her passion for theater, though she naturally had a melodious voice. It was the training in breath control, pitch, intonation, and inflection that refined it. Claudette always felt a deep appreciation for the education she received there. In the school library, proudly displayed on a shelf beside a photo of President John F. Kennedy, is a photograph of Claudette Colbert, signed by her as a token of gratitude to her old school. After her classes, she would take swimming lessons at the nearby YWCA. One day in her rush to get home from her swim by 8:30 p.m., a time strictly mandated by her mother, she missed seeing a traffic light change as she stepped off the curb at the corner of 53rd and Lexington. This misstep led her directly into the path of an oncoming truck, resulting in a broken ankle and knee, along with spinal injuries so severe that she was confined to bed rest for 4 months. She also faced lingering back issues for the rest of her life. During the 4 months I was helpless in bed, and for the following 5 months when I walked on crutches, and then with a cane, I changed a lot, she later explained. This period of forced immobility, and the attention she received from visiting classmates and teachers, was something of a turning point for her. Later on, I even dramatized my illness, and clung to the cane long after I really needed it. The actress within her began to take shape, and she sensed that her moment in the spotlight was just around the corner. And it was around this time, at high school, that she switched to her middle name, Claudette. In 1919, Claudette was on the brink of stepping into the world of theater, though she hadn't quite made the leap. By December of that year, any dilemma between sticking with school or venturing onto the stage was resolved. She found herself in the spotlight at the Provincetown Playhouse, starring in Edna St. Vincent Millay's Aria da Capo. This play, Millay's critique of the senselessness of World War I, blended elements of surrealism and allegory. It is now thought to have foreshadowed the avant-garde theater that would emerge later on. Despite this taste of acting, Claudette felt the need for further artistic development after the curtains fell on Aria da Capo. She went to the Art Students League, located on West 57th Street, which was known for its reasonable fees, professional instructors, and flexible class schedules, with a wide array of courses from printmaking and drawing to painting and sculpture. To finance her studies, she took on work as a dressmaker's assistant and taught French lessons for $3 an hour. The period from 1920 to 1922 was relatively quiet on the acting front. Claudette focused on her language tutoring, continued working at the dress shop, and her art studies. Her painting lessons revealed to her the symmetry of the human face. She learned how one side often appeared more defined than the other, even in the most natural-looking portraits, as this was how faces were in reality. Claudette did not like the fact that her face was round, but her left side more sharply contoured, and she would later use this insight to her advantage. When she transitioned into film acting, she made sure cinematographers captured her better side. As her star power grew, she was known to demand the rebuilding of entire sets, so that only her left side would be seen on screen. The other side of her face became known in Hollywood as the dark side of the moon. This eccentric demand was one of the things that contributed to her reputation as a premium Hollywood diva. In 1923, Claudette got the stroke of luck every success story needs at some point. At a cocktail party attended by stage luminary Catherine Cornell, one of Claudette's French students introduced her to Anne Morrison, soon to be known as Anne Morrison Chapon, a budding playwright casting for her debut play, The Wild Westcotts. It was at this encounter that Morrison suggested she try out for a part. Claudette auditioned, landing the minor role of Sybil Blake, with just a handful of lines to deliver. However, this role wasn't at the modest Provincetown Playhouse like her previous roles, but on Broadway, at the Frazee Theater. She would be earning $50 a week, a considerable sum for a minor part. Prior to stepping onto Broadway, Claudette and her mother agreed her surname needed a change. Jeanne Chauchon, who privately disapproved of her daughter's acting career, yet wasn't against the perks it brought, proposed Colbert as the new surname. This wasn't a name from their family tree, but borrowed from Jean-Baptiste Colbert, the finance minister of King Louis XIV. Jeanne was already eyeing the financial uplift acting could bring, foreseeing a lucrative decade ahead for Claudette under this new name. She would also begin to place herself as a kind of divine monarch who ruled over every aspect of her daughter's life, and yet did not seem willing to express any love or affection towards her. The opening night of the Wild Westcotts was on a surprisingly warm Christmas Eve in 1923. Theater enthusiasts at the time were spoiled for choice, with over 40 productions playing, including hits like Abby's Irish Rose at the Republic, Poppy, featuring Madge Kennedy and W.C. Fields at the Apollo, and the Ziegfeld Follies, captivating audiences at the New Amsterdam Theater. The Frazee Theater, however, was notorious for hosting unsuccessful productions, and unfortunately, the Wild Westcotts, a comedic tale of two sisters' romantic escapades, did nothing to change this reputation. Although the New York Times on December 25, 1923, conceded that the play was amusing, it failed to make an impression, with Claudette's performance going unacknowledged. While the New York Times might have overlooked Claudette, producer A.H. Woods certainly did not. Upon receiving a letter that introduced Claudette to him, Woods wasted no time signing her to a contract, and proudly announced to the media that he had discovered her, making her his protégée. A.H. Woods was born Aladar Herman in Budapest, Hungary, and he was known for his baroque personality, his love for smoking huge cigars, his collection of silk shirts, and his signature large jade ring. He had a knack for making actors feel at ease, simply asking them to trust in his guidance. Claudette placed her trust in Woods, and this partnership marked the beginning of her practical education in theater. Woods nurtured her into a dedicated actress. Over the next 6 years, Claudette found herself constantly employed, moving from one production to another, a feat quite common in the bustling theater scene of the 1920s, which could boast up to 50 live shows running at the same time. It wasn't long before Woods presented Claudette with a play that seemed tailor-made for her, A Kiss in a Taxi, a lively adaptation of a French boulevard comedy. The New York Times remained unenthused, and Claudette's performance went unnoticed once again. However, then, as now, the New York Times does not always reflect the popular mood of the day. The audience found Claudette delightful, and this popularity supported the play for a long run of 103 performances. Claudette's next Broadway appearance was in The Ghost Train, another production by Woods. The Ghost Train offered audiences a thrilling narrative set in a remote train station rumored to be haunted, where stranded travelers face an eerie night. It was a classic setup that was reminiscent of the old dark house genre of melodrama. As reported by the New York Post this time, Claudette emerged as a standout star of The Ghost Train. Her presence at benefits, dinner parties, and other high-profile events didn't go unnoticed by the media either. Her star was truly growing on Broadway now. Following the close of The Ghost Train, Claudette's schedule didn't slow down. Among several notable productions, The Barker was one which would change her life in more ways than just one. It premiered on January 18, 1927, at the Biltmore Theater, a venue that quickly became dear to Claudette. This was the longest engagement she had experienced to date, lasting 6 months. Walter Houston starred as a carnival show manager who dreams of a different life for his son, who was played by Norman Foster, hoping he would pursue law instead of the show business. Claudette and Foster worked well on stage, but they were even better off stage. They fell into a whirlwind romance. In March 1928, Claudette and Foster set sail aboard the SS Aquitania, arriving in London to bring The Barker to British audiences. Their London stint was also marked by their marriage, conducted without the knowledge of her mother. To their peers, Claudette and Foster might have seemed like an unlikely pair. The Indiana native Foster was very much the all-American boy, while Claudette radiated a Parisian sophistication. What was less apparent was Claudette's deep love for Foster, a passion she would describe as un grand amour. This is an ancient French idea of a truly great love that is a kind of madness and can only happen once in a lifetime. And for Claudette, it was with Foster. Yet even grand amour couldn't slow Claudette's yearning for independence and a career. More than anything, she sought freedom from her domineering mother. But Foster's entrance into her life inadvertently intensified her mother's meddling. Their marriage, described by both as modern, raised eyebrows even among the gossip-savvy fan magazines, especially given their unusual living arrangements. Claudette remained at her Central Park West home with her mother, grandmother, and Tantine, while Foster resided at the Lambs Club on West 44th Street. Claudette defended their setup, saying that for couples in their profession with separate incomes, living apart was ideal. The truth was that Jeanne would not let Foster into her home, and the idea of Claudette moving out was met with serious opposition, so this was the only compromise that would somewhat abate her mother's fury at the marriage. Her brother Charles also loathed Foster, a fact that, as we'll see, would come to a violent conclusion some years later. Fan magazines targeting women who were deeply influenced by the romantic narrative spun by Hollywood depicted Claudette's marriage as the model of sophisticated lifestyle. This was how marriage was done in Paris now, they claimed, with the husband and wife remaining in roles of lovers who sipped champagne and smoked expensive cigarettes. It was a nice spin, but entirely false. In the week leading up to October 22, 1929, there were early warnings of instability in the stock market. Then came the crash on Monday, October 29th. The following day, the New York Times jumped on the crash, sending an already panicked Wall Street into terminal decline. Variety put it more succinctly. The headline on October 30th read, "Wall Street lays an egg." The question loomed, would Broadway face a similar fate to Wall Street? The answer was that the crash would devastate far more than Broadway. It would put the entire world in the grip of financial ruin. Claudette often said that the Wall Street meltdown influenced her shift from stage to screen. In reality, she had already ventured into talkies a year prior to the crash, and even worked on a silent film with Frank Capra in 1927. The crash, however, solidified her and Norman's belief that Broadway's golden era of the 1920s, when theatergoers could pick from 50 shows on any given night, was over. Adding to this realization was her disappointment in participating in 2 consecutive plays by Pulitzer Prize-winning authors that turned out to be duds. Claudette wondered if the coming years would offer better opportunities, or continue the cycle of fleeting successes and tours. However, Claudette's view was that silent movies demanded minimal effort from actors. Yet recognizing the growing allure of cinema, she entertained the idea of film acting and talking pictures, especially if the compensation was appealing. The opportunity arose when Leland Hayward, then the production manager at First National Pictures, was impressed by Claudette's performance in The Barker. He suggested her for the leading lady role in Frank Capra's 1927 silent film, For the Love of Mike, a comedy to be released by First National. Capra was thrilled to cast a Broadway talent like Claudette in his film. She had no idea who Capra was, and even less of an idea of what he would eventually become. Claudette's first encounter with filmmaking was so negative that she vowed never to return to it. In truth, the film was so poorly received, it almost ruined her movie career at the first turn. Capra, being relatively inexperienced at the time, failed to inspire confidence in her, to say the least. They clashed throughout, and her disdain for Capra would not ease for many years. By the end of the 1920s, Claudette had honed a stage presence that seemed adaptable for film. Claudette also realized she had much to learn about film-specific makeup. Her heavy use of eyeshadow revealed her stage background. Once she understood that film audiences didn't need exaggerated features to see emotions from a second-tier balcony, she worked on a subtler appearance, for the left side of her face at least. While working on The Hole in the Wall, Claudette wasn't fully committed to going to Hollywood. She believed that as long as films were produced in Astoria, she could leverage her career in both film and theater. This dual approach allowed her to alternate between movie sets and stage performances. It involved traveling to California to shoot pictures, but this inconvenience was balanced by her now drawing 2 incomes simultaneously. Claudette's ascent to movie stardom was shaped by her association with Paramount. Paramount was arguably the most European-flavored of the major studios at the time, which included MGM, 20th Century Fox, RKO, and Warner Brothers. During the 1930s, while all studios produced films set in Europe, none matched Paramount's flair for Parisian-style elegance and sophistication. This distinctiveness was largely due to Paramount's founder, Adolphe Zukor, who frequently visited Europe to scout for fresh talent, particularly from Paris. Unlike other studios that featured American city streets on their backlots, Paramount boasted a Parisian street, complete with charming lanes, cafes, and smoky dance clubs. Paramount's interiors, especially the bedrooms, were marked by a pristine, shimmering white, a signature look crafted by art director Hans Dreyer, known as the white look. Claudette's value at Paramount wasn't just in her ability to tackle diverse roles. Her roots naturally brought a touch of Parisian chic to every film, whether or not it was set in Paris. Her performances lent an air of refinement, making comedies seem sharper and dramas more nuanced. This was to become her signature, a sophisticated, elegant, and understated performer. Her bilingual talent was another asset, especially as Paramount produced several French versions for the European audience, and Claudette was always ready to lend her skills for the right price. Claudette's abilities as a businesswoman were being honed down to a fine blade by her mother and her brother. Her filmography continued to expand rapidly, with titles like Young Man from Manhattan, premiering in April 1930, followed by The Big Pond, Manslaughter, and Monsieur Parks within the same year. Claudette featured in 4 films in 1930 that were shown both in the United States and Europe, a feat she repeated in 1931. Before The Big Pond hit theaters, Paramount released Young Man of Manhattan, featuring Claudette alongside her husband Norman Foster. Despite its anticipation, the film failed to impress critics, being criticized for its lackluster pace and overall dullness. However, it stood out for introducing Ginger Rogers to the silver screen, where she delivered the memorable line, "Cigarette me, big boy." Despite the real-life couple's presence, the film's romantic dynamics fell flat. Foster was criticized as one of Colbert's least compelling co-stars, and the pair apparently suffered from a lack of chemistry on screen. This did not bode well for their real marriage, undoubtedly suffering under Jeanne's authority and the continued separated living arrangement. In 1930, Dorothy Arzner, one of the rare female directors of the time, was tasked by Paramount with directing a film initially titled Sex in Business. However, the early regulations of the Production Code Administration led to a title change to Honor Among Lovers. The film was a bomb, and Claudette was forced to complain about the sexual harassment which her co-star, Frederick March, was inflicting on her. They would work together again in another film, and Claudette would take matters into her own hands next time. For now, 1931 was a busy year for Claudette, featuring her in several releases: Honor Among Lovers in February, The Smiling Lieutenant in July, Secrets of a Secretary in September, and His Woman in November, where she played alongside Gary Cooper. Claudette's next project was under the direction of the acclaimed German-born filmmaker, Ernst Lubitsch. The Smiling Lieutenant was a standout in her career. Her filmography for 1932 included titles like The Wiser Sex, The Misleading Lady, The Man from Yesterday, Make Me a Star, which featured only a brief cameo by Claudette, and The Phantom President. These movies didn't detract from her image, but neither did they significantly bolster her standing as an actress. She was craving something grander to match her talents, and she would soon get her opportunity. With the release of The Misleading Lady, Claudette had fully transitioned to living in Los Angeles. The days of shuttling to work were behind her. Her new base was Paramount's Melrose Avenue location in Hollywood, leaving behind the Astoria studio in Queens. Having crossed the Atlantic at 3 and moved to the U.S. at 8, Claudette was no stranger to big moves. She would be joined, naturally, by her mother and brother, Charles. Charles had adopted the last name Wendling to escape the teasing associated with their French surname, Chauchon, which led to people calling him Shoeshine. Her mother had also forced Claudette to take Charles as her agent, a role in which she excelled, securing deals that would soon position her among the wealthiest women in the nation. Leaving New York marked the end of one chapter in Claudette's life, and the beginning of an even more glorious one in Hollywood, as Claudette and her mother set off from Grand Central Station, aboard the 20th Century Limited for Los Angeles. It was a bittersweet farewell. Marie Augustine, Claudette's grandmother, was in her mid-80s, and though the Lows were known for their longevity, Claudette couldn't help but wonder if this goodbye might be their last. Indeed, she never saw Marie Augustine again, who passed away a few years later. Now in Hollywood, Claudette faced a new level of competition, far more intense than anything she had experienced in Astoria, and she no longer had her grand amour living nearby. Foster stayed behind in New York, not due to their modern marriage, but because his play Savage Rhythm was debuting in December 1931. The Man from Yesterday was Claudette's first full-time Hollywood film. It depicted the harsh realities of World War I with remarkable authenticity. In the film, Claudette's character, Sylvia, grapples with the news of her husband's death in combat, only to find love again with Surgeon René Godin, who is played by Charles Boyer. This leads to a dramatic encounter in Switzerland with her supposedly deceased husband, who is merely gravely ill. This storyline eerily foreshadowed Claudette's own future adventures and challenges. Boyer and Colbert shared a strong camaraderie as fellow French actors, quickly becoming close on set. Jeanne, Claudette's mother, saw potential for romance and tried to play matchmaker between Claudette and Boyer. However, despite the maternal matchmaking attempts, Boyer was already smitten with Pat Patterson, an English actress who briefly shone in Hollywood during the 1930s, before choosing to step away from her career to marry Boyer in 1934. Their union lasted until Patterson's passing from cancer in August 1978, a loss so profound that Boyer took his own life 2 days later. Claudette's final film of 1932, The Sign of the Cross, truly catapulted her into the spotlight, transforming her into a cinematic icon. Despite not playing the lead role and being third in the billing order, she earned $15,000 for this role, $10,000 less than her usual fee. Yet the opportunity to star in a Cecil B. DeMille epic, which was seen by more audiences than any of her films that year, was invaluable. DeMille, who had long admired The Sign of the Cross as a stage play, believed Paramount was the perfect studio to bring his vision to life. However, this required mending fences with old adversary, Adolf Zukor, and agreeing to strict budgetary and time constraints. DeMille accepted, grateful to be working in his preferred studio environment once again. The cast was nearly set, with Frederick March and Alyssa Landy in leading roles, and Charles Laughton portraying a memorably flamboyant Emperor Nero. Yet DeMille was still searching for his Poppaea. Claudette, who was known on the Paramount lot for her subtle yet intense sensuality, caught his eye as the ideal choice for Nero's Empress wife. DeMille recalled in his memoir how he propositioned her for the role, asking her how she would feel about playing the wickedest woman in the world. Claudette enthusiastically accepted the challenge. However, the period also highlighted a growing aspect of Claudette's personality, her ego. Now a celebrated star, she was dissatisfied with her billing in the film. Despite understanding she would be listed after March and Landy, Claudette demanded that her name be the most prominent among the female cast members in the credits, insisting on exclusive prominence in font size and placement. The Sign of the Cross became one of DeMille's most controversial works. Before production even started, B'nai B'rith insisted that a rabbi review the script, something DeMille respectfully declined. Nonetheless, he did send it to Reverend Christian F. Reisner, who criticized it as cheap and disgusting, suggestive and unclean, and took offense at Paramount's assumption that he would approve of such content. The film's provocative nature undoubtedly stirred the public, and the enthusiasm for it among moviegoers was a factor in the stricter enforcement of the production code and the establishment of the Legion of Decency by 1934. DeMille's comeback to Paramount was designed to create buzz and draw crowds, something the studio desperately needed to tackle its $15 million debt. Despite the film's financial success, it couldn't fully dispel the shadow of bankruptcy looming over Paramount in 1932. To combat this, Paramount introduced a new board with Wall Street ties and moved Zukor from president to chairman of the board. This was the end of Paramount's idealism as a studio in some respects, and the beginning of its transformation into a corporate machine. Production kicked off on July 24, 1932, wrapping up within the allocated 8 weeks and staying within the $650,000 budget, leading to release date set for November 30th. DeMille promised and delivered, a spectacle of luxury and excess within the confines of a tight budget, filling scenes with lavish details and opulence, creating an image of Rome that aligned with audience expectations without overspending. Claudette relished her role as a sensuous Poppaea, first seen indulging in a lavish bath of what appeared to be ass's milk, cleverly simulated with powdered milk by DeMille. However, filming delays meant Claudette spent extended periods in the bath, causing the milk to sour and stick in clumps to her skin. It was suggested that she was nude in the bath, another slice of controversy, but she later claimed she was wearing a white bathing suit to protect her modesty. Meanwhile, the very immodest March was once again assaulting Claudette at every opportunity he got. He pinched her behind during one photo session, an act that was caught on camera. Furious, she took the images to the executives. From that day, she would have a clause in her contract whereby she would approve all set photographs personally prior to publication, a practice that is common for all actors today. This role fueled Claudette's ambition to become Paramount's leading lady, with Marlene Dietrich as her only real rival. Despite Dietrich's allure and enigmatic presence, Claudette felt she surpassed Dietrich in both versatility and fan base. Their relationship was one of intensity and widespread speculation. As 1934 approached, Claudette was on the brink of winning her first and only Oscar for a film she initially had very little enthusiasm for making. Frank Capra's It Happened One Night became an enduring favorite, surprising many, including Claudette herself, who doubted the project's potential, firstly because of her negative opinion of Capra, and secondly because it originated from Columbia, a studio on Poverty Row. Claudette considered it far inferior to Paramount in terms of artistic merit, and her up-and-coming co-star Clark Gable referred to Columbia as Siberia. "Clark and I kept wondering," she explained later, "what kind of reception can this kind of picture actually get? I must remind you, this was shot in 1933, right in the midst of the Big Depression. People needed fantasy. They needed a dream of splendor and glamour. And there we were, looking rather seedy riding on a bus." Finding an actress for the role of Elspeth Andrews was challenging. The name was eventually renamed to Ellie. There were stars like Constance Bennett, Miriam Hopkins, Carol Lombard, and Margaret Sullivan who reportedly turned it down. Although Clark Gable hadn't yet reached his peak fame at MGM in 1933, he became Capra's choice for Peter Warren after Robert Montgomery was unavailable. Claudette was planning a holiday in Sun Valley when Harry Cohn from Columbia reached out to her. Despite her skepticism about the script, she accepted the role of Ellie, enticed by the promise of a swift 4-week shoot and a paycheck double her usual Paramount fee, making $50,000, which was significantly more than Clark Gable's $10,000 fee. The production team found Claudette difficult, labeling her as aloof and hard to please. Despite this, she shared a good connection with Gable. In fact, the chemistry on screen was not merely down to the wonderful acting. It was fizzing off screen too. They managed to be discreet enough to successfully deny rumors of romance. However, this would become one of Hollywood's longest-running topics. Did they, or didn't they? The movie cleverly played with themes of desire and attraction between Claudette and Gable, focusing on their characters' development rather than their mere appearances. Claudette found Gable's mischievous behavior amusing, though she didn't always endorse it. His playful antics, including a memorable prank involving a potato masher being placed down the front of his pants, helped lighten the mood on set. This was a contrast to the more reserved atmosphere she was used to at Paramount. Yet she had her limits. A now famous incident reported by Capra showed Claudette could be fiercely jealous and insecure. When the moment arrived to shoot the memorable scene in It Happened One Night, where Ellie Andrews daringly reveals her leg to flag down a ride, Colbert was hesitant. She talked at performing what she deemed an unladylike act. Capra introduced a body double, but this fired up Colbert's competitive spirit. Upon seeing her potential replacement, Colbert declared, "Get her out of here. I'll do it, that's not my leg." As ever, Claudette was extremely demanding about how sets were created. Everything had to be just right to only show her left side, an even more challenging prospect in the new, down-to-earth genre of romantic comedy. 1934 marked the pinnacle year for Claudette, with 3 significant films. It Happened One Night has remained a cinematic treasure. Then there was Cleopatra, another lavish DeMille production. And finally, she starred in Imitation of Life, a successful drama. Each film received Best Picture nominations in 1935, with It Happened One Night sweeping the Oscars for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Screenplay, and Best Director. During filming for Cleopatra, she faced DeMille's fierce temperament. He had a total disregard for her ongoing health issues. Recovering from appendicitis, she found the shoot grueling and painful, standing for many hours at a time in heavy costumes and makeup under the scorching studio lights. DeMille was always very proud of his robust health and saw sickness in others as a form of weakness. Moreover, her ophidiophobia made the production a fearful event for her. DeMille's initial solution, introducing a large boa constrictor, only heightened her fear of snakes. Eventually, a compromise with the smaller garden snake was reached. Despite these hurdles, Colbert delivered a brilliant performance as a skillful manipulator of her Roman suitors. Cleopatra was produced just before the production code's strict enforcement. This allowed Colbert's costume to subtly reveal her figure for the final time, before the crackdown on suggestive female costumes were enforced. The design included a halter top with crisscrossing straps and a tastefully daring slit in the skirt. This film was Colbert's final project with DeMille. Colbert was thrilled by her first Oscar nomination for Best Actress for her role in It Happened One Night. However, the nomination was overshadowed by controversy when Bette Davis entered the race as a write-in candidate, following a public outcry over her omission. This change undermined Colbert's confidence. She felt overshadowed by Davis's soaring popularity, and her insecurity kicked in once again. Convinced she stood no chance against Davis, Colbert chose to skip the ceremony. She decided to take a cross-country train journey instead. That night, her film dominated the Oscars. Yet, as her victory was announced, Colbert was absent. This snub was much to the chagrin of studio head Harry Cohn. As Colbert prepared to board her train, Cohn scrambled to locate her. He managed to track her down and dispatched a lackey to go and collect her immediately, telling him to stop the train if he had to. But even after being told that she had won, Claudette did not want to return, mainly because she didn't have anything to wear. Colbert reconsidered upon realizing the award's potential for her career, so in the end she made a brief appearance at the ceremony to accept her Oscar, handed to her by a young Shirley Temple, before hastily returning to her train. The Oscar win only became real to Colbert upon her arrival in New York, where her newfound fame manifested in an overwhelming fan response. Then, in July 1935, Paramount offered her a lucrative 7-picture deal. This raised her salary to $150,000 per film and allowed her the flexibility to work on additional projects outside the studio. That year also saw a major change in her personal life. Dr. Joel "Joe" Pressman, who was a surgeon who had performed her appendectomy in 1933. She returned to him for treatment for sinus issues, and they discovered a personal connection. Pressman preferred the shadows to the spotlight. To Colbert, this was a refreshing contrast to the showbiz personalities she was accustomed to. Pressman didn't rely on any facade. He was confident in his professional excellence, as one of the top surgeons in his field, but Pressman acknowledged Claudette was unlike any other patient he had encountered. He was totally besotted with her. For Claudette, the connection with Pressman was different from what she felt with Foster. By 1934, her relationship with Pressman had deepened to the point where she felt she had to end her marriage with Foster. She had loved Foster passionately, despite never having lived together during their 7 years of marriage. But these impracticalities had deadened the relationship, and there would be little hope of resolving them as long as her mother was around. While visiting Claudette, her brother Charles violently attacked Foster. The thick-set and burly Charles beat him savagely, breaking his nose. Claudette took Foster to see Pressman to have the damage repaired, but little did he know that the doctor and his wife were embarking on an affair, which surely was a further humiliation to Foster when this became apparent soon after. In August, Claudette formally sought a divorce in Juarez, Mexico. The split was reported as friendly, with Foster planning to marry Sally Blaine, Loretta Young's sister. In June 1935, Carol Lombard hosted a notorious party at Venice Beach's amusement park. It attracted a crowd known for their free-spirited natures. They included Marlene Dietrich, Lily Damita, Josephine Hutchison, and Claudette Colbert, among others. The event lasted into the early hours and became a gold mine for the press photographers present. One photo in particular blew up a storm. It showed Colbert and Dietrich in a suggestive pose on a slide. Immediately, widespread speculation about their relationship was all over the papers. Dietrich was known to have affairs with women, something that hardly batted an eye in Paris or in the erstwhile German capital of Weimar. But Hollywood was still easily shocked. The rumor never went away, and the mill turned for many years. In truth, it seems that this often accepted fact was probably untrue, but not definitely false. After Colbert's passing, Helen O'Hagan, her long-term companion, clarified that Colbert and Dietrich were barely acquaintances, but this was despite their simultaneous tenure at Paramount. Leonard Gersh, a friend, claimed that Colbert was unexpectedly shoved into the photo with Dietrich by a photographer. Despite the rumors, it appears there was little affection between the two, at least not on Dietrich's side. Franco-German relations were not improved by her remark calling Colbert ugly, and then cattily saying, "She was so shop-girl French." However, photographs by Jerome Zerbe from the same period suggest a closer relationship than publicly acknowledged. Contrary to Dietrich's public comments, Robert Shaw, a friend of Colbert's in the 1950s, said he believed there was a romantic moment between the two, but it seems Dietrich may have spurned Colbert before engaging in some public name-calling, none of which was very becoming for the usually classy Dietrich. In the mid-1930s, Claudette Colbert found herself among Hollywood's elite, ranking 6th and 8th in Quigley's Top 10 Money-Making Stars poll for 1935 and 1936. By 1938, her financial success was unparalleled, becoming the highest-paid actress in Hollywood, with with an annual income of $426,000. In fact, she was listed as one of the richest women in the entire U.S. in 1937 and 1938. Her popularity with moviegoers was only surpassed by Shirley Temple, Will Rogers, Clark Gable, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, and Joan Crawford. Throughout the late 1930s, Colbert balanced her roles between romantic comedies and dramas. On the set of Tovarish, she clashed with director Anatole Litvak over the dismissal of her preferred cameraman. She refused to go on with production until she could select a replacement, even offering to forego her salary to cover any potential budget overruns. Nothing, not even money, was more important to her than keeping the right side of her face off the screen. 1939 brought an unexpected shift for Colbert, as she stepped into MGM for a role initially meant for Myrna Loy in It's a Wonderful World. Loy, initially cast as a poetess entangled with an escaped convict, played by James Stewart, was redirected to continue her famed role in The Thin Man, a series she was cast alongside William Powell, a suave figure you can hear all about in this video on screen now. MGM sought a different kind of comedic talent for this screwball mystery, so they turned to Colbert. Having already established herself as a screwball comedy icon, Colbert was a natural fit for the part. In 1940, Claudette Colbert turned down a 7-year contract with Paramount Pictures, which would have paid her $200,000 annually, after realizing she could earn $150,000 for each movie as an independent actress working for whichever studio she chose. This decision led her to star in a series of acclaimed films. Among these, she played a key role alongside Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy in 1940's Boomtown for MGM, which became the top-grossing film in the U.S. that year. Despite her numerous roles, Colbert often mentioned Arise My Love, also from 1940, as her personal favorite. The film clinched the Academy Award for Best Story. The Palm Beach Story from 1942, directed by Preston Sturges, has gained recognition over time as a comedic gem, and it is considered one of Colbert's finest performances. However, the production of So Proudly We Hail in 1943 saw tensions between Colbert and Paulette Goddard. Goddard bonded with the film's young star Veronica Lake. Colbert, who by that time was aged 39, took exception to the implication from Goddard that she was too old to hang out with them. She never spoke to Goddard again. Colbert's comedic talent shone brightly in 1947's The Egg and I with Fred MacMurray, which emerged as the second most successful film that year and ranked as one of the 1940s most profitable American movies. Sleep My Love, featuring Robert Cummings, enjoyed modest box office success. By 1949, Colbert was still a box office draw, ranking 22nd among Hollywood stars. In 1949, Claudette Colbert was chosen for the role of Margot Channing in All About Eve by producer Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who believed she perfectly matched the character's elegance. Unfortunately, a severe back injury forced her to withdraw just before shooting started. This paved the way for her old rival Bette Davis to step in and earn an Oscar nomination. Colbert later remarked on her missed opportunities to portray villainous characters, saying, "I just never had the luck to play bitches." Entering the 1950s, Colbert faced the challenge of transitioning from romantic leads due to her age. Nevertheless, she was eager to maintain her prominence in the industry. She took on more physically demanding and unconventional roles. In Three Came Home, she portrayed a woman detained in a POW camp. She was willing to forsake her glamorous image and even consented to being filming from her less favorable side. She was beginning to find it more difficult to secure the roles she wanted, losing out to actresses of her own age as well as younger ones. Her increasingly fearsome reputation among set designers and wardrobe were not exactly in her favor. Also, her brother's management was increasingly ineffective. She was completely unwilling to bend on her strict professional boundaries. These included her insistence on leaving the set by 5 p.m. to dine with her family at 7 p.m. sharp, as ordained by her mother. In the early 1950s, Colbert took a hiatus in Europe for tax reasons and scaled back her film participation. The planter's wife found success in the British market, and she had a minor role in Royal Affairs in Versailles, her sole project with French director Sacha Guitry. During this period, Colbert also collaborated with director Douglas Sirk, with whom she had previously worked on the 1948 noir Sleep, My Love. Their reunion for Thunder on the Hill in 1951 was another notable project in her career. Sirk would depart from Hollywood by the decade's end. The 1950s saw a downturn in Hollywood's fortunes, partly due to the 1948 Paramount Decree, which mandated studios to divest their theater chains, transforming them into mere production and distribution entities. Claudette's box office appeal had waned from the previous decade when she starred in 15 films, to just 8 in the 1950s, culminating in a solitary film in 1961, marking the end of her cinematic journey. From 1952 to 1955, Claudette navigated careers across continents and coasts, venturing into film, television, and theater. Television offered a new stage for her talents amidst changing film industry trends. The allure of the big screen was fading against the rise of more revealing fashion, louder soundtracks, and a decline in sophisticated comedy. So with this in mind, Claudette made a triumphant return to Broadway with The Marriage Go Round in 1958. This won her a Tony nomination for Best Actress. However, by this time, her film career was essentially concluded, with her final movie role in Parish, as Troy Donahue's mother, the commercially successful film that nonetheless did little to revitalize her screen career. Claudette continued to grace Broadway in productions like The Irregular Verb to Love in 1963, The Kingfisher in 1978, alongside Rex Harrison, and Aren't We All in 1985, also with Harrison. These plays enjoyed warm receptions from audiences who were always pleased to see her. The theater crews were not always so enthused by her arrival. As with movies, sets and scenes had to be meticulously planned to highlight her preferred profile, and her wardrobe selections were often sent back, leading to attention backstage whenever she was present. At the time, Claudette welcomed Verna Hull into her life as a kind of chauffeur companion. However, with her film career behind her, Colbert was ready to decamp for a life of idyllic luxury. Claudette's affinity for Barbados was not so much for the island itself, but for the ocean. An avid swimmer, she loved the freedom of swimming in natural waters. Her enthusiasm extended to buying a 19th century plantation home on the island's west coast. She and Pressman moved into the home once it had undergone a hugely expensive renovation. In a candid revelation to designer Arnold Scassi in 1979, Claudette disclosed that she had an abortion, influenced by her mother's conviction that a child would tarnish her love goddess image. This was a label her mother alone ascribed to her daughter. The child was Foster's, and he was devastated by her decision. She never had any children. Rumors about Claudette's sexuality first emerged in New York during her theater days, and were reignited by her modern marriage to Norman Foster. This led to unfounded gossip about both. Verna Hull made her artistic debut in New York in the mid-1950s with her first exhibition held at the Circulating Library of Painting on East 72nd Street in October 1955. Verna Hull was heir to a Sears Roebuck fortune, and she had already made headlines for her liaisons with Dietrich and Greta Garbo. Her artwork, praised by the New York Times for its evanescent charm and pretty and feminine hues, was critiqued by others for lacking depth. By 1962, her creations were featured at the Monet Gallery on Madison Avenue, and she later embraced abstract expressionism. Following Claudette's move to Barbados, Hull also relocated there, with a residence adjacent to Claudette's. Pressman and Claudette's Barbadian housekeeper, Mary Corbin, both harbored a strong dislike for Hull, but Claudette was keen to have her friend and chauffeur nearby. Under Pressman's insistence, she eventually distanced herself from Hull, whom they both came to refer to as the monster. Hull's obsessive behavior and voyeurism led to Pressman erecting a physical barrier between their homes. But this did little to dissuade Hull, and Colbert wanted to keep her around in spite of her reservations. Joel Pressman, meanwhile, eagerly anticipated his retirement and was looking forward to gardening and leisure. However, a major health crisis interrupted his plans. Upon returning to Los Angeles in 1967 to conclude his professional duties, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. Faced with a terminal prognosis, Pressman decided to return to Barbados to spend his final days with Claudette. When she first heard the news about his condition, Claudette reached out to Frank Sinatra for assistance. They arranged for Pressman's transport back to UCLA Medical Center on Sinatra's private jet before flying him home. Colbert kept a vigil at her dying husband's bedside throughout the ordeal. As the end neared, her maid knocked at the door. She was holding a letter and told Colbert that the sender, Verna, insisted she read it privately and that it was urgent. The letter explained that Pressman had revealed during an altercation with Hull that he intended to kill Colbert so that she couldn't live on without him. Colbert's blood rose, and she left the room in a fury without saying a word to Pressman. She flew into a rage at Verna, making her pack her bags and get off the island once and for all. She threw every gift Hull had ever given her back in her face and ended the relationship right there. This emotional manipulation of her dying husband's condition was an unforgivable act. Following the death of her husband, Claudette also faced the loss of her mother and brother in rapid succession. Surprisingly, Claudette found a sense of liberation from these profound losses, feeling unburdened from family responsibilities. This newfound freedom spurred her return to acting. She secured a celebrated role in the 1987 miniseries, The Two Miss Grenvilles. She also introduced Frank Capra as he was inducted into the AFI's Hall of Fame, speaking glowingly of the director who gave her her greatest role. Her disdain for him long evaporated. She also finally put to rest at least one of the great questions that had swirled around her for years. She and Gable did have an affair while they were shooting It Happened One Night. As for Dietrich, that remained a secret. In her final years, Claudette experienced a number of mild strokes. She passed away in 1996 in Barbados at the age of 92. Her body was taken to New York City for cremation and funeral services. A requiem mass was held for her at the Church of St. Vincent Ferrer in Manhattan. Claudette's ashes were interred in Gaudings Bay Church Cemetery in Spadestown, St. Peter, Barbados, next to her mother and second husband. She did not have children and left the majority of her $3.5 million estate, which included her Manhattan apartment and her Barbados home, Belle Rive, to her close friend Helen O'Hagan, a retired Saks Fifth Avenue executive. The two had met during the production of Parrish and became inseparable by the 1970s. Following Pressman's death, Claudette had requested her friends to regard O'Hagan with the same affection they had for Pressman. Claudette's reputation often highlighted her diva-like behavior, but she was much more than that. It is too easy to dismiss an actress as a so-called nightmare, when in truth she was a trailblazer, a brilliant businesswoman and a relentlessly hard worker. Contrary to her public image, she was also known for her sharp wit and robust language. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She's famously showing her earthy side to actress Patricia Medina on the set of The Secret Heart by greeting her by saying, "Who the f*** are you?" Claudette maintained a blend of sophistication and independence. She always did her own makeup, even when going for a swim. She was even wearing makeup when she passed away. She prepared her own breakfast, usually oatmeal, and took care of the dishes herself. A diva, certainly, but that's what a Hollywood movie star is all about. At home, she was a loving wife to Pressman, and dealt stoically with an overbearing mother, and she was one of the rare actresses who lit up Hollywood's golden age. More than anything, she was one of the rare actresses who lit up Hollywood's golden age. That concludes this episode of Hollywood Mysteries. If you would like more rainy tales from the dark side of Tinseltown, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, it's good night from Hollywood Mysteries. Sweet dreams.